the skull. So I'm going to begin with the sutures. We're going to start with the coronal suture, which connects the frontal bone to the parietal bones. Then we have the sagittal suture, which connects the parietal bones. The lambdoid suture comes across here, connects the occipital bone to the parietal bones. And then the squamous suture, which connects the temporal bone to the parietal bones. Okay, so now we're going to start with the frontal bone. This is what it looks like when it's detached from the skull. We have the frontal bone. The smooth, flat surface, this is known as the frontal squama. And then we have the supraorbital margins right here. So this is where the eyebrows go. Then we have the supraorbital notch. It doesn't form a complete hole, so it's a notch, but on this side, as you see, it is a complete hole, so that, or a complete circle. So that is the supraorbital foramen. So supraorbital notch, supraorbital foramen. Okay, so now we have the parietal bones. They come together like this with the, again, the sagittal suture. So those are the parietal bones, left and right. Okay, moving on to the occipital bone, which is this bone right here. We have the foramen magnum and the flat surfaces right here. These are the occipital condyles. Then if you look at this bump right here, that is the external occipital protuberance. External occipital protuberance. So that is the occipital bone. Okay, so now we have the temporal bone, which looks like this. On our multicolored skull, it's this brown bone. All right, here it's this bone. So we have the squamous part, which is this smooth, flat surface. Then we have the zygomatic process of the temporal bone. Now that's because it connects to the zygomatic bone, which is this yellow bone, the zygomatic bone, that looks like Texas. So when those two connect, they form the zygomatic arch. So this portion on the temporal bone is a zygomatic process, but when it connects to the zygomatic bone, it forms the zygomatic arch. Then we have the external auditory meatus, or the external acoustic meatus. When you turn the temporal bone to the other side, internally we have the petrous part. Now from this view we can see other portions of the temporal bone. We have the styloid process. The styloid process. The one that that looks sharp, that's the styloid process. And then you have the mastoid process. So mastoid process, styloid process. Then you have the carotid canal or carotid foramen. This is where your carotid artery goes into your brain. And then you have the jugular foramen. Okay, so this one is the carotid canal right here, that perfect circular one, carotid canal. And then the jugular foramen is here. This is where your jugular vein goes through. So you can see where my pipette's going, jugular foramen, carotid canal, or carotid foramen. Okay, and then we have the mandibular fossa, this rubber part right here. This is where the mandible articulates with the temporal bone. So they articulate there, that is the mandibular fossa. Okay, so now we have the sphenoid bone. It looks like a butterfly or a bat. This structure right here that looks kind of like a toothpick at the end, this is the lesser wing, and then this one is the greater wing. So greater wing, lesser wing, and then these structures right here, these are the pterygoid processes with a silent P at the, so it's PT, so pterygoid process with a silent P. You have the body, which is the central structure, and then if you go to the inside of the sphenoid bone, you have the sella turcica. Sella turcica. So if we look inside our skull, right here would be the sphenoid bone, and then we have the sella turcica right there. Okay, and then we have the supraorbital fissure, which is this slit right here, the supraorbital fissure, and then the optic canal. So the optic canal is right there. So where you see my pipette go through, that's where your optic nerves go through. Right there, so optic canal. If we look at it on this model, you can see the optic canal is back there. Optic canal and supraorbital fissure. Now we have the ethmoid bone. So this fin-like structure on the top, that is the crista galli. And then we have the cribriform plate, which is kind of like the floor of the ethmoid bone. The holes that go through that floor, or the holes that go through the cribriform plate, are the olfactory foramina. So that's where your olfactory nerves go through that allow you to smell. So the olfactory foramina go through the cribriform plate of the ethmoid and then the crista galli. We can look at it on the inside of this model. So the crista galli is right here, and then you have the olfactory foramen through the cribriform plate. And they come down, then the ethmoid comes down to make the perpendicular plate of the ethmoid, this top part. If you look at this model, it's this yellow part on the top. So the perpendicular plate of the ethmoid is right there. So that's where ethmoid bone is, and it comes down through there. So those are your cranium bones of the skull. The next video is going to be the facial bones.